Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Rob and today we are going to be painting Sons of Medusa. Now this is a perfect video if you do not own an airbrush. We are going to be using a sponge to create our volumes and our highlights, and in fact we're going to be using a makeup sponge. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but again, if you don't use an airbrush, this is going to be a really useful video for you, and lots of the things that we do here can be applied against lots of different schemes, lots of different chapter schemes as well. So we're going to either start off with a black or a brown primer for our model. I'll leave it up to you which one you use. I decided to use brown, but I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference. And then we're going to use these very close-knit makeup sponges. Now, I have seen Treverian do a recent video about these, but the first person I had actually seen using them was Swarm Painting on Instagram. He did an absolutely amazing Black Armor Raven Guard tutorial using them, and I was like, man, I must try this. Bought them months and months ago, but just haven't got around to using them, so I thought I would give them a go and see what we can create. So we're going to start off by using Guardian Green first. This is one of the Army Painter's deep greens, but I often use this as a base for the vibrant greens. I think that this is a nice dark colour, and actually it's a natural step up to the kind of like the emerald forest, the leafy greens that we'll be using a little bit later. As I say though, we're just using this as a base all over. It might require you to break up some of the sponge in order to get into the nooks and crannies of the model. I did find that a sponge this large was actually quite difficult to get into some of the deeper areas, but you can just break off some of the not pointed side and do that. I just held it with some tweezers just to get into those areas. Your fingers are often too big to hold it to get into some of these kind of areas of the Terminator. Next up, we're going to use Emerald Forest. So you can see here, if we use Guardian Green over 90% of the model, we are using the Emerald Forest now, probably 80-70% of the model. We're building up the volumes here. I'd say probably 75% of this model is covered in the Emerald Forest. And the Terminators are really nice to be able to create these big volumes, but essentially by volumes all I mean is where the light is hitting, and you can get kind of some nice sick fades on the model, on these big boulder like shoulders, on the top of the torso here, on the front of the power fist as well. This is what it looks like. It looks super rough, and at this point I was not convinced that this is the right way or the right direction, but I did stick with it, and I think that what I would say about this video is trust in the process, because it does look really decent by the time it's finished. Next up, we're going to use Leafy Green. If we were using 75% before, probably using something like 40% of Leafy Green here on our model, and again we're building up those volumes. And in terms of light direction, I've decided to create a light coming directly from the front of the model and a light directly coming from the back of the model. So that means that when we move the model to the side, you'll notice that it is in darkness. You can still see that Guardian Green color. And just build it up where you think that light would hit those areas. So it's starting to look a little bit stronger now. And the colour I think is great. If you want a vibrant Sons of Medusa colour, I think this is the one. Right, next up we're going to use Rainforest. Now again, this is a really quite bright, vibrant colour. You can see it's almost a greeny yellow here. And if we were using like 40% before, really we're just using this in the top 10% of the model. This is our typically type highlight, and in terms of sponging, we will not go brighter than this. This is as bright as we'll go. I think if you could easily do this and on a Dreadnought or something larger than a Terminator, I think that wouldn't be an issue at all. I was thinking as I was doing it, yeah, you could definitely do this on flat panels, things like tanks and things like that. Next up, we're going to be using Molten Lava and Oak Brown. Now this is a little bit unusual because I'm moving away from the sponge now, and what I've done is I've created a wash, a glaze of these two colours in about a 50-50 mix. And what you can see me doing here is just pushing this glaze, this very thin wash, into the shadows. Essentially, where we still have the Guardian Green left over, I'm just pushing it into those darkest areas. So it is hitting some of the lighter green, but it is really kind of, we want most of it to end up in that darkest area. And what this does is, what I'm trying to do is to create some color contrast on our model, just to make it a little bit more interesting. Kind of shading greens with browns is quite natural, or shading greens with oranges is quite natural. I think that, you know, you look on the color wheel, these are not directly contrasting colors by any means, but they are contrasting colors in the sense that one is a cool color, one is a warm color. So we're using color theory here just to really accentuate the contrast of the model, and really accentuate, you know, the Terminators is great for this. I always talk about this, you know, the boulder like shoulders on the Terminators just really make for sick panel modulation, and we're just doing that by further enhancing it with some kind of color theory. Next up, we're going to use matte white. I've used grey on the helmet. I've just primed it grey, and then I've taken another sponge here, a clean sponge, and I'm using matte white on this one. And you can see me focusing on particularly on one side of the head, because I knew that when I wanted it to fit inside the torso, I wanted it to be at a slight angle. And I think that this is what sponges are really good for, actually, building up nice natural looking volumes, especially if you don't own an airbrush. So you can see one side of the head is actually left in darkness, left in that darker grey colour, and then this side of the head, which I'm really focusing on, is almost pure white. Next up, we gloss the entire model, and then we apply transfers using microset and microsol. The transfers are specific Sons of Medusa transfers, but they are, I think, from Fallout Hobbies. I got them some time ago now. They took longer than Games Workshop transfers would take to kind of like adhere to the model. And you do have to cut quite closely around the transfer, because it's just essentially one plate of you know, one sheet of kind of film. So yeah, just bear that in mind. I then regloss the model at this point just to protect the transfers, and then we're going to move on to our oil washes. Now the oil washes, again, what I'm trying to do is use some color theory here. So I'm creating a brown and orange oil wash, kind of I basically chose these two oils because they are almost identical to our lava and brown colors that we're using to feather into the shadows. Now this Winsor & Newton color is called cadmium orange hue, and then we also use burnt umber as well. Now if you've watched any of my previous videos, burnt umber is a oil that I use all the time, and then this orange color is one that I often use for rust, but I don't think you really need to get too hung up on which specific orange oil color that you use. As long as it is an orangey tone, that's absolutely fine. You could use burnt sienna, but what I would say is that this is just slightly, I wanted something slightly darker than burnt sienna, or raw sienna in fact. So kind of sometimes mixing your own oil washes, I think works quite well. And then we're going to use this as an all over oil wash. I don't often do this. This is not something I often do with models that I paint, commissions that I do. But for this particular model, I did want it to stain the green areas, and I really want it to melt. I really wanted those oils to melt into all the work that I had done with glazing into the shadows with that brown colour. And also using this as an oil stain over the top just helps smooth transitions as well with the green. And you've got layers on layers here, and I suppose, you know, you could say this is like a grimy color, but I was less interested in creating grime on this model than I was more interested in creating kind of color contrast. Yeah, I think that was my particular focus for this model, which is why you've seen with my edge highlighting, I've tried to be a bit more precise and a bit more precise with the scratches than I usually would be when doing video tutorials. We're just using a Q-tip now. I left it for probably about 90 minutes, just a Q-tip, just wiping away any excess at this point. This takes a few minutes to do. I didn't actually clean this in white spirit. This is just literally the oil wash just coming straight off using a cotton wool pad. Next up, we're going to use rainforest. Now, this is the time-consuming bit. Now, you don't have to do this bit, but I do think doing this edge highlighting process just makes the armor just pop really, really nicely off the table. So I think it is worth the effort. You can see the rainforest against the rainforest highlights. You can't see much of a highlight here, but there is one. But it really pops off against those kind of like brown colors that we've got in the shadows, and it looks really, personally, I think really nice. Not necessarily realistic. You know I've used kind of scale modeling techniques in the sense that I've used kind of oil kind of washes and things like that, but actually we're going back much more to what I describe as a traditional Games Workshop method of kind of like edge highlighting here. But because we've used the oil washes, these edge highlights will now really pop off the model. You don't need to do every single edge highlight, but my recommendation is you try and do as many as you can, and this will take this process probably about half an hour to do. You've got a squad. This is a good, this is like an evening's work. We do one in an evening and then do something else, right? I think if you were doing kind of edge highlighting all day, it might make you go mad. You can see here that with that rainforest color, I've also done some scratches in the armor. And then next up, we're going to do some Banshee Brown. And then you can see here, I've created like an underline with that rainforest color, and then with the Banshee Brown, I'm just coming in to do the actual deeper scratch here. Now, having this kind of underlined color just makes the scratch look 3D. And I think I wouldn't do this for every single project, but for this one, I think it works really, really well. I was trying to go for a particular kind of style for this model. I had a kind of like a particular image in my head, and I think that having kind of like these 3D scratches actually worked well in this case. Just to say as well, when we did the edge highlighting, that I did matte varnish the model before we moved on to that edge highlight. Next up, we're going to use matte white, and then all the areas that are not going to be green, we are essentially painting matte white. This is a technique that I use lots and lots in my videos, particularly with these Terminators. It's just so easy to do, and this white is going to act as a base coat for all the speed paints that we're going to use next. So actually, after this point, everything's fairly quick. Like, because we're using speed paints, it's going to be quite fast. Ash and Stone, I'm going to mix 50-50 Ash and Stone with some speed paint medium, and then the Crux Terminatus, the one on the knee and the one on the shoulder pad, and then the Aquila on the front, I hit with the Ash and Stone. It just needs one coat of this. Just be careful, don't slop it all over the model, because we don't want to kind of have to redo that armor, and we don't want to have to redo those edge highlights as well. So just make sure you do this neatly. You don't need a lot to make it go into all the recesses. Next up, you can see here I'm using matte white. Now this is actually just matte white mixed in with a little bit of that Ash and Stone, just to do an initial highlight, and then I'll go in with pure matte white just to do those tippity top highlights. But this is just such a simple way to do kind of Aquilas. I would do this exactly the same with Blood Red, when I did the Imperial Fist Terminator last time as well, and I'll do exactly the same when we use the when we did the Crux Terminatus. Next up, so I just wanted to show you, because it's exactly the same process here. So with the wax Oath of Moment, the Purity Seal, I hit it with Murder Scene, let that dry, then mix Murder Scene with some white, and then doing some tippity top highlights with those with that Murder Scene. A wax seal is obviously shiny, so you can almost mix pure matte white into that Murder Scene color to get to where you need to be. Right, let's do some glowing lenses here. So the two lenses on the top are going to be exactly the same as we do for the eye lenses. So we hit that lens with white, and then some very thin blood red speed paint mixed in with quite a lot of speed paint medium. We just go over that area, and you can see that I'm actually hitting the bottom of the rim of the lens as well. That's okay. A little glow around the outside is perfect. We hit the lens again with just white in the center, and then next up we're going to use some radiation glow here. Now, radiation glow is the fluorescent orange from the Army Painter, and we just hit that, just the orange with that radiation glow. That's it. That's a glowing lens. Like that, you know, well, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it straightforward. You don't need any more than that. And we do exactly the same process. This, you can see with the helmet at the moment, is just the blood red element, and then I will further enhance that with the kind of the fluorescent paint. But you can see that we want to go a little bit over the edges with blood red, and then come in and be quite precise with that fluorescent color. Next up, we've got Banshee Brown. I just did some dry brushing, dark silver and then light silver on the base, and then coming in with Banshee Brown, just with a normal sponge this time, not a really close-knit sponge like the makeup sponge that we were using. And then we're going to use some weathering powders here. These are from Ammo. These are quite old, these weathering powders. So I kind of had them in my arsenal. I don't remember ever picking them up, but they were like the perfect colors that I wanted to use. However, one was too dark and one was too light, and so I mixed them together to create kind of a Goldilocks rust kind of effect that I wanted. Again, to kind of just match the overall tones of that oils, and then what we use to glaze into the shadows, that oak brown and molten lava mix. So you can see that lots of the colors are really consistent across the whole piece. You know, I'm using actually a fairly limited palette, despite using kind of like really vibrant greens. The rest of the palette is just kind of quite limited, so it all kind of like joins together. And what I would say about this is it just makes it quite tasteful. So mix those two weathering powders together just with some water, which just acts as a suspension, and then we can lather this all over the base, and then we can also lather it over the feet as well. And you can see this is the model. That's it. It's finished. It's all done. As I said, it's quite tasteful. We've got a little flourish with some glowing eye lenses there. We've got some quite interesting kind of like shadows with those browny oranges in the shadows that contrast really nicely against the armor. We've got quite cool, realistic looking base. Yeah, I think it looks really, really good for something that actually didn't take that long to achieve. 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours, you know, and then plus drying time on top of that as well. I really hoped you enjoyed this video. I hope it was useful. I hope you feel like it's given you the confidence to kind of go and use sponges on Marines, and just shows you how versatile they can be, especially if you don't own an airbrush. And I hope it gives you confidence to do some crazy stuff with some color contrast within your own armor panels for your Marines as well. Marines is always obviously so much easier to do, because particularly for these like larger Primaris Marines, these larger Terminators, you can create some really kind of like sick fades and sick blends on them, which is why I often use them for tutorials. But you know, the next time you are you know, painting a Marine like this, you know, think about the contrasting colors you could put into the shadows of the armor, and see what you can come up with, because I think that often doing that makes it look, yeah, quite exciting. Thanks ever so much for watching the video today, guys. Don't forget to like, and don't forget to leave a comment as well. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please make sure you do. I really appreciate every subscriber who joins the channel, and trying really hard to grow the channel at the moment as well. Take care, guys, and I shall see you on the next one.